Greetings and welcome to the Seahawks 360 podcast, a SportsEthos production, where we look at the Seahawks from every angle, every week. I'm your host, Candace Higgins.
And I'm Tino, Ganacias, host of the Mariners cast and guest on the Seahawks cast.
Absolutely. And we are so excited. It's a privilege and a pleasure to talk Hawks with you. Maybe not today as much, because if you watched week one, it was quite the Debbie Downer. It wasn't really nearly as fun and as excited as everybody thought it would be. Everybody pretty much allotted this as a win. Everybody allotted it as a dominant win. And not only was it not a win, we got dominated. Debacle. Yes, exactly. It was a debacle. So I'll start with you, Tino. What were your thoughts, impressions, man? How you feeling?
Where do we start? So I've seen different numbers, but 2 net yards in the second half for the Mariners, for the Seahawks offense.
Yes,
that's the first place I would start. The second place I would go is the pass defense was a negative all around, right? Mm-hmm. And all the things we talked about that we were slightly concerned about coming into this game, the second and third cornerback spots, the ability of the middle linebackers in coverage, the pass rush. I know there were some decent pass rush numbers, but defense needs work. I think the questions, I come away thinking we can start asking some real questions as to whether this defensive philosophy that Pete Carroll has held on to actually works in today's NFL. I think that's a legitimate question to ask. I think there were some huge red flags for me coming from this game. And that's not even beginning with the offense. My takeaway with Gino is that he wasn't dynamic, right? Mm-hmm. There was nothing special about Gino's performance. And I get that both tackles were out. Yeah. But there was nothing where I walk away saying, you know what, I love our quarterback. I believe in our quarterback. I know the numbers are there from last year, but he didn't show me anything.
Yeah.
And then, the other takeaway is, and I know we differ on this, I want him to run the ball. Kenneth Walker averaged 5.3 yards a carry. He only got 12 carries. And this was even with the tackles out for a certain amount of time. And with the running game going, then I think that opens up the passing game. The biggest thing that I walked away with from this game is if I asked you what is the identity of the Seattle Seahawks on offense and what's their identity on defense, could you genuinely define that for me, right? Like you talk about winning teams, you can say this is what they do well. Mm-hmm. Successful businesses, you go to a barbecue spot, that their pulled pork sandwich is what they do, right? That's what they do. They do it best. I love that about them. They have an identity. The same thing for me with sports. Teams have to have an identity. I don't know if they're a passing team because they have 3 great receivers. I don't know if they're a running team because that's been their DNA, at least historically. I don't know if this defense is a 2 deep safety, keep everything in front of you type of defense, or if they want to capitalize on all the capital they've invested in edge rushers. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't walk away from game one not knowing who you are, right?
Well, I'll say this. Generally, for the most part, I agree with everything you said, for the most part. The only thing I differ is that I say, really, the first few weeks, you're really trying to build your identity because you have an identity on paper, right? In that first few weeks, I'd say after week 4 or 5, you should be able to know what you do well. It generally does take, right, a while, unless the team has a lot of continuity and a lot of veterans and that kind of thing. That's sometimes like where the 49ers, where you'd see like an obvious identity there. But outside of that, for the most part, I'll give a little leeway on the identity thing, at least in week 1. But it is something to watch for because in theory, I 100% agree with you. And we'll see on paper, it was supposed to be the wide receivers, but those guys didn't show up. But I want to go back to a point that you made that was very interesting that I agree with you on. I've been sort of not a Pete apologist, if you will, but I've been sort of understanding of Pete and understanding his value that he brings beyond what other people do. When things got rough, I wasn't team fire Pete Carroll. But I am beginning to question, like you said, the philosophy, because Pete's shown a willingness to adjust, but it only seems like it's to a certain extent. And I feel like the extents to which he's not willing to adjust have been consistent issues over the years. The issues that we're seeing, the reason why I'm not going to call this a trap game is one, it's week one. And the reason I'm not going to call it a trap game is because the issues that plagued that defense have been issues in varying degrees at various points over the past, I'll say, 5 years. Now, was the run defense as big of an issue? No, but that was a problem with the 2020 defense. If you go back and you think about how historically bad that defense was, it was because people were throwing 500 yards on you, and the run defense was like top 5, but who cared? Because everybody passed the ball on you. And it seemed like that's really more what it was as of yesterday. Just they did some running of the ball. I will say they attempted to run the ball a fair amount. Actually, if you go back and look at the box score, but what was successful for them was passing all the time, to the point that they could have, if they wanted to, completely abandon the run. It really kind of did the Seahawks a favor that they didn't, because that was the one thing they seemed to do well. So we just keep seeming to go from one extreme to the next. And to me, that has a lot to do with, like I said, he's willing to adjust, right? So he's taken on this Vic Fangio type of defense concepts, right? The principles, 3-4, whatever. But you saw a ton of 4-man fronts out there yesterday. And you saw a lot of what I call Pete Carroll coverage, right? Soft zones. Last year they did split field coverage where half the field was man, half the field was zone. They did a lot of, I'm not going to say they did a ton of blitzing, but they increased the blitzing more, which is important. If you're going to switch over to the Big Fangio, you got to do more man principles things. You got to do more. You got to be more aggressive in terms of blitzing. You got all these man coverage corners in the offseason, and then you run zone. What?
Well, and you also have, I said this on the last Seahawks 360 that you have Reek Woolen.
Yeah.
Take advantage of him. Say, you know what? I want you to lock up this guy over here. We're rolling all of the coverage. You have no help.
Yep.
You have no help, right? Yep. You stick to your man. You have no help. We're rolling all of our coverage to the opposite side. You can do that split man zone stuff if you really wanted to. If, because you have this asset, it's like you have an asset that you're not actually utilizing. You're not using. And I would also say that from a personnel standpoint, we might be running a 3-4. But if you have Nwosu and Mafe, you don't want them in coverage. So really what you're running is you have 5 linemen in a lot of ways, right? Because they're not really dropping. At which point you've got Wagner and Brooks in coverage, essentially.
Yep, because you're not dropping your outside linebackers. Exactly.
Right. And we haven't even started on the Lions in the preview because, with the Lions, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs are their 2 best offensive players. Gibbs is a running back who catches balls out of the backfield, and Amon-Ra St. Brown goes over the middle over and over again. Absolute technician in the middle of the field. It's the Seahawks defense 2 biggest weaknesses is coverage from the middle linebackers and being able to cover backs out of the backfield. But back to your point, like I said last time, I didn't want them to go into these like 2 deep coverages and play soft and keep everything in front. And you correctly predicted that the Rams would just nickel and dime the Seahawks to death. And it's what they did. You had a second string wide receiver. Now, Puka Nacua was a 4-star recruit who was at UW and then ended up at BYU. So he is talented, but you're not talking, this isn't DK Metcalf, right? This
Justin
is
Jefferson. It's not any of those guys.
No. And it was clear that there's a scheme. He took the Cooper Kupp spot, and there's a scheme to get that number 1 receiver on that team tons of targets.
Yep.
But he ate them up. There is no way you should be able to bring a rookie off the bench to have 10 receptions and 119 yards against your defense. It's inexcusable.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely inexcusable.
It was in my opinion, I lay this loss at the head of coaching. There's a lot to blame to go around. Sure, the players can execute better, but the players were put in by far, I believe, the poorest position they could have been, particularly given the matchup. It's like they just rolled out a game plan and they didn't consider the opponent at all. Sean McVay knows how to eat your zones like nobody else has ever known how to do. Better than Kyle Shanahan can eat up your zones. Right. So why would you have a zone almost exclusive. I don't know if I saw it. I mean, I didn't see the four corner. I don't know when I did hear they went to man some, but so I'll say zone heavy. I was going to say zone exclusive. I'll say zone heavy.
Sure.
Concepts. Why would that be your plan against Sean McVay, especially to start the game, right? If it was like you implied and you started off a certain way, then when you get ahead, they pull out that prevent defense, which is exactly, they started out the prevent defense at the beginning. They prevented them from winning. I will stand by that. It kills them every time, but that was a terrible game plan. I don't see anything smart about it.
You don't, and the other thing is, if you would expect the coaching staff to come in with plan A, B, C, and D.
Yes.
Plan A is whatever you feel like is your strength. Okay, we're getting tore up by these two wide receivers. Matt Stafford clearly is healthy. We're not able to get to him quick enough. What's your plan B? Okay, let's go to man, right? Maybe we even play like a off coverage in man, and we're not being that aggressive, but something. If that doesn't work, okay, we're going to get in your face and play bump and run now. We're going to change it up. But you got to have, 4, 5, 6 game plans. If one doesn't work, you can't just keep rolling out the same, over and over again. And that's kind of how it felt, that they just weren't prepared for what happened, which is crazy to me, because that's the one, even us, as we're not paid to cover the team, but we knew that this is what was going to happen. This was the recipe for the Seahawks to lose, right? And I like your point too about either like Pete Carroll either being able to coach a team that shuts down the run or the pass, but it's not really ever both. The Rams had carried the ball 40 times for 92 yards. That's 2.3 yards a carry, right? Cam Akers, everyone made a huge deal. 22 carries, 29 yards. Horrible average.
Yep.
And yet they lost.
Badly.
And I just, we talked about Trey Brown. I feel like Trey Brown is a talented corner. I like him. I think the fact that he hasn't played that many NFL games really, really kind of came to the front in this game.
Yeah.
Because he got burnt. I think they smartly identified the need for Devon Witherspoon in the draft. I know people were surprised when they took him at 5 overall, but it's clear that the Seahawks need a second corner.
Yes.
Really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad. I don't know. Yeah. We talked about whether Witherspoon will play in the slot or not. If he's good on the outside, I would almost rather like to see him outside full time if he can really lock that up, even though we might not be totally capitalizing on his talent, just because it's such a need on the outside with that second corner, at least as of right now. That's what I see.
It's a tough call, though, because Kobe Bryant was worse than Trey Brown by far. No, seriously. They targeted him 10 times. He allowed 7 receptions. He allowed, I think, the most yards or the second most yards. It was bad from Kobe Bryant's perspective. And because of that, I almost feel like I kind of want him. I want them both, really. Like I want him nickel on nickel downs, and then I want him base. I almost feel better because people know to attack the middle, right? If you go back and you look, Next Gen Stats put out Matt Stafford's, sort of his throwing chart, his direction he threw. Almost all of it was over the middle. And so another reason why I feel like you got to lock down that nickel position is because I think it puts players like your linebackers, like Bobby Wagner, like Jordan Brooks in a worse position, because if they're targeting the middle of the field already, because your nickel back is, you can automatically count on being able to get a catch there, then you're also going to try the linebackers there as much because you're already going in that area. If you force to the outside a little bit more, I think it helps your case for Bobby and for Jordan, where they don't get exposed nearly as much, because that's sort of what the Rams did. They just had good players down, in the middle. So people weren't trying to attack Bobby. It wasn't worth it. You were just, better off trying to get to the outside and see if you can attack the weaknesses that way. I'd rather that, because I think Trey Brown has potential. Like you said, I think he just gets the reps or needs the reps. And, I still can't figure out who's worse, him or Mike Jackson. They both did poorly in this game. I think it depends on the matchup too. Because sometimes Brown size affects him.
They say, like a good manager or a good leader puts their people in a position to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. You may not have the most talent. You may not have the best workers, whatever the analogy you want to use, but you got to set them up to succeed. You got to know their skill set, right? And the reality is when you put Brooks and Wagner in coverage, that's not what they do best.
No.
And I think when you have both of them out there at the same time, it's not a good fit, in my opinion, at least as of right now. Because if they're both in coverage, all of a sudden you're going to see teams attack them over and over again. Bobby Wagner had 19 tackles. So clearly he can stuff the run. Yep. Clearly he can make tackles. I think Jordan Brooks had 12, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
It's clear what their talent is, but you're not setting them up to succeed by putting them in coverage all the time. And they're short. Both of them are 6 feet? And you got them backpedaling and trying to get deeper into coverage. Of course they're going to complete passes over their head. You're not setting them up to succeed. Fred Warner is 6'4"? That's part of why he's more agile. That's part of why he's so great in coverage. So to me, you are not taking your personnel and really setting them up to be great, right? You're putting them in positions to fail. Same thing we talked about with Jamal Adams in deep coverage. Mm-hmm. You're not taking advantage of his talent. So Wagner allowed 6 catches for 62 yards when he was the nearest defender in coverage.
Yep.
That's not great, right? Matthew Stafford was 8 of 9 for 85 yards between the hash marks. To your point, they were attacking the middle over and over and over again. It was curls, it was dig routes, it was all the things that we had talked about. And no, this is 3, 4, 5 years. This was Bobby Wagner when he was young, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
It's frustrating. And what's interesting, you mentioned this early in terms of the game, the plan A, plan B. It seemed like their plan A and plan B wasn't schematic. It was personnel because they rotated almost every cornerback. Every cornerback got snaps. Right. So it's like, this guy isn't working, let's try someone else. This guy isn't working, let's try something else. Okay, have we considered that maybe it's not the players? If you roll out every single cornerback except for Tariq Woolen, and they all suck. No offense, they did. They all suck. And Tariq Woolen didn't even look particularly great. He did okay, but he didn't look great himself. Mm-hmm. If all of your cornerbacks look bad, including your Pro Bowl cornerback, then perhaps you should make some schematic adjustments at some point. And it's just, it took too long from, in my opinion, for them to, or really for Pete to even acknowledge it. In the post-game press conference, he mentioned a quote. I tweeted this out, but essentially he was saying something along the lines of that he misjudged. Basically, he thought they'd be able to do some of the things that they used to do, and they'd be able to come in and win this game. You didn't consider the possibility that if it didn't work, you didn't have a plan B. Like, I guess that's what bothers me the most about it. And some people, I felt like he was, if you go back and look at the coverage, it really was more 2021 Pete Carroll coverage, 2020 Pete Carroll coverage. And so some people felt like he wasn't talking about that part, that they thought he was just talking about, I don't know, the players or just that game in and of itself. Now, I took a bigger picture look at it because it looked so identical to other things we've seen in the past. And I thought that the presence of Deshaun Side was missing, particularly in that secondary when it comes to coaching. Absolutely. But if I'm wrong about that, and I'm just maybe thinking too big picture, despite that quote is still where I'm looking for. It
rings hollow, right? Yeah. It rings hollow. And there's, there are teams where there are two different approaches that UC coaches take. One is, we're going to impose our will on you. We are better than you. We have more talent than you do. You have to adjust to what we do, right? You're going to adjust to what we do. We don't adjust, right? Memphis Grizzlies, who you cover. Grizzlies are the Grizzlies. They're going to do what they do.
Yep.
And they're going to impose their will. They're younger, they're stronger, they're all those things, right?
Yep.
If you have the talent, you can do it, right? If you have John, you have Triple J, you can do it. But the Hawks defense in particular, the offense might get there. The defense doesn't have that kind of star power, right? And so if you don't, the way to win is you have to be multiple. You have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to kind of mix and match and figure out what's going to work and what's not, because you don't have the talent and the physicality to impose your will on the other team. Now, if the pass rush gets better, right? If Mafe starts to actually get to the quarterback instead of almost there, and if Nwosu can do what he did last year, and Draymond Jones can start to put pressure, now you're imposing your will, right? Pass rush imposes their will on the other team. Then you can stick to whatever concepts you believe in and not have to adjust because you are the better team. But the Hawks don't have that.
No.
And when you don't have that, you have to immediately be able to identify and say, you know what? let's go do something different. We want to win the scheme. Let's go do something different.
We were told that was the reason they changed schemes to begin with.
For sure.
Right?
So
to be more multiple.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it?
I don't know. I would guess that behind the scenes, that second cornerback position in Witherspoon is pivotal. And I would guess that they believe that their concept will work with both corners playing lockdown coverage, right? It doesn't address the safety position. It doesn't, the safety covering, the shorter over the middle stuff. It doesn't address Wagner and Brooks, but it is a start, right? If you can lock down both edges or both outside wide receivers, and you can get pressure putting 5 in the pass rush with both edges and the 3 down linemen, then you've got something, as long as you can cover the middle. But when you got that weakness on that second corner, they could pick anything. They were at a dang buffet, right? They picked anything they wanted except for going at Reek because everybody was open. We haven't even talked about the offense yet.
Yeah, no. We'll get there. We will get
historically bad performance in the second half. We haven't even got there yet. That's wild.
Well, because a lot of people understand that a lot of what happened with the offense was literally them not being able to be on the field in the second half. Yeah. Like the defense was on the field so long that their opportunities were historically limited, just as was their production. Like, I mean, the defense played 81 snaps. That's insane. So
I think the offense ran 14 plays total, I think, in the second half.
In the second half, it wasn't a lot. So I think that's why they're getting a little bit of a break here, is because the defense was overwhelmingly the problem. They just couldn't get off the field. Mm-hmm. But I want to go back to a point that you were saying with the corners, right? Mm-hmm. My biggest concern, Witherspoon or not, I fear to look at Witherspoon as a savior, because if they plop Witherspoon in that same game plan, guess what? Witherspoon doesn't look good either. Right. Because what was he known for coming out of college? He was the best man corner in the draft. Mm-hmm. And zone is his area of weakness. Mm-hmm. So unless they plan on adjusting the game plan, I don't know how much Witherspoon's going to help, but he will help to some degree because he's just got good instincts. I give him that. He's got better instincts than any of the other corners. But how much? I mean, he's still going to get eaten up. He's still going to get burned if you plop him in that same approach.
I would hope that their plan was to play, that they would have run a different game plan defensively if he was in the game, right? I think if he was in the game, maybe they could take more chances trying to get pressure on Stafford because they had more confidence. Maybe they would play more man because of his presence. That's my hope. I don't know if that's the case or not. I don't know that I trust the defensive coaching staff, to see much at this point in time. I hate to say that because, I want to believe in him, but the reality, you pointed out Sean Desai being gone, like it was very clear the impact of his absence, right? And there's a reason why he was coveted by so many organizations in the offseason. I don't know. I'm concerned. I'm concerned schematically. I'm concerned about the coverage over the middle. I'm concerned that Draymond Jones didn't show much.
Yes.
Right? And you spent big money on him. You don't ordinarily spend big money on defensive free agents. And I'm obviously concerned about that second and third corner and the strong safety. Julian Love didn't show out. So what is it? How are we any different than we have in the last couple of years defensively?
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, I will say they did statistically, surprisingly, Jaron Reed, Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor all popped up on top 10 in pass win rate. Sorry, pass rush win rate. Why is that such a tongue tie for me? Anyway, all right. So they did well. Now it didn't show up in terms of impacting the game, but I think that's a lot to do with how poor the coverage was. I mean, you can be as fast as all get out. You still got to get over offensive lineman. By the time you do, if everybody's wide open, then what's the point of you rushing the passer? Exactly. Ball's already out. So Draymond Jones not showing up is a concern. But I'm wondering about the preparation a little bit. And this is probably my last point with coaching, but it's well known that Pete Carroll does not do joint practices. And he might be one of the few teams left. I don't really know too many other teams that don't do joint practices at any point during the preseason. There are some, and Pete's not alone. I just can't recall those who don't off the top of my head. But it's a pretty common practice all over the league.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's preventing the Seahawks from doing a couple of things. I know everybody always has a fight in the joint practices. I know that's the downside, right? Okay, right. But is it worth it a little bit to be able to properly evaluate your talent? Because one, you don't know if you need to reinvest in other positions, because perhaps when it comes to your trenches, Draymond Jones looked like a beast. But maybe against our offensive line, it didn't really mean very much. And you wouldn't know that until week one. Whereas if you had a joint practice earlier in the preseason, you will be able to make personnel decisions that would let you know where your team truly is against other competition. I worry about that. I also worry about the fact that, I understand why Draymond Jones didn't play well. He didn't play the snap since he was with the Broncos. They do light practices with the Seahawks. That's pretty common. They do a lot of walkthroughs. They don't do it. They don't tackle. Pete Carroll makes that known. That's why it's always an issue in the preseason. So yeah, I get why the guys in the trenches don't look that good. All the more reason why, if you're not going to play them in the preseason, you got to have those joint practices on, because your guys got to be ready to go week one. You can't afford a 3-4 week wind up for your star players. I get why you don't want to play them in preseason. Do the joint practice. That's why these teams do it. You don't want to play them for no reason. Those joint practices are valuable, and you can run whatever you want, right? People won't see it on TV, so there's no worrying about people stealing certain concepts. None of that. I really think that's another one of my questions with Pete. Is he properly preparing the players? Not these other teams. The NFL was pretty sloppy in terms of turnovers, but I felt like with tackling wasn't as much of an issue. And I feel like the Seahawks, their defensive linemen at least, really struggled with the ability to tackle. Safeties too struggled with the ability to tackle because these guys just don't get reps.
Right. I think your point is well taken that, even say 10 years ago, you had the quarterback in a red jersey and everyone else just kind of played football, right? And you got your reps in. Same thing in baseball, same thing in really every sport nowadays. They're so concerned with injury that an investment that you have this like long ramp up time at the beginning of the regular season. And I think the teams that can ramp up quicker, you can get some easy wins really quickly because you're in better shape and more ready to go. I also think it speaks to the lack of depth on the defensive line, that if there was more experienced depth on the defensive line, you would not be so concerned about Draymond Jones getting injured, right? Because you had someone to replace him. The reality is you got rookies essentially behind him that would take his spot if he was to get hurt. So on the one hand, I understand protecting the investment, but I think you're right. Like if you don't hit and you don't get those reps, you're coming in. Yes, you're a veteran. Yes, you know what it's like, but your body still has to adjust, right? I expected to see more from him from the pass rush. I expected to see more from him. I expect him to be more of a leader of that defense. I didn't see a lot of that either. I think Jaron Reed is the leader of that defensive line. He played well. Now I was from just my elementary eye, I was really impressed with his ability to hold down the nose and to get penetration. I was excited to see that. Right. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there are questions about coaching and preparation that very much need to be asked. And offensively as well. I think there are questions that need to be asked about game plan offensively and whether they were ready to go.
I'll say this. I don't mind the game plan offensively. I don't think it was offensively. I don't think was the issue as much. I do think it was some sloppy execution. That on the offensive side, I actually feel like it was the opposite, right? On the offense, I felt like it was player execution and not as much of the game plan. I thought I saw different formations. I saw pre-snap movement, maybe a little bit too heavy on the screens. We're still not good at that, especially at the beginning of the year. Probably a little too heavy on that. Other than that, they were getting down the field. Now, they weren't able to finish those drives. And had they been able to finish those drives, I think would have made a huge difference in the game. Because they scored on it. When you score at every opening, was it the first 4 drives? I think at least the first 4 drives they scored. At least, field goal.
I think it was 3, yeah. But yeah, they had 13 points. So I think
the fourth one the missed field goal.
Okay,
fourth one was a missed field goal. Okay, so they put themselves in a position to score, but they didn't get the points. I don't blame that on Shane Waldron. I also don't blame the fact that he didn't really get the chance to do anything in the second half. I mean, it's hard to sit on the bench for like 15 minutes and then just come off and just be great. I'll give him a little slack with that. I was concerned about Tyler Lockett, who did not do well. I just feel like you should have got a little bit more from your top end talent. You kind of expect your rookies to struggle. JSN didn't look as great as we thought he would look.
Sure.
You understand that. Jake Bobo was Jake Bobo.
We barely saw him, right?
Yeah.
There was a play where he was wide open.
Yes.
And Gino didn't see him.
I don't think he had the time.
What was going on with Gino, though? Because
didn't have the time.
For sure. But he's got the athleticism to be more improvisational and to escape a little more than what we saw from him. Like I said, I didn't see anything dynamic from him at all. But from my opinion with the offense, I'm a believer in feeding DK over and over again, because I think at some point he's going to produce something big. I love him. I don't know. I'm a DK.
I love him. I just got to disagree with the force feeding, because I think the force feeding is backfired. We've seen it with Russ. It can backfire.
But if you can take, even if it's an incompletion, and you can move that safety over to DK's side because they're afraid of him on go routes, it does open stuff up for others. So in part, it's a decoy. Yeah. But the big thing for me, and I know we disagree on this, and maybe it's my University of Michigan roots, I want him to run the ball. I don't think Geno Smith is a 35-40 attempt a game, successful 35-40 attempt a game passer, right? I think I do go back to thinking that Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. And if your defense is as vulnerable as this defense was in week 1, the best thing you can do for that defense is to hold on to the ball, because they don't have to be on the field nearly as much. And so, again, I go back to Kenneth Walker going 12 for 64 at 5.3 yards a carry. You're averaging over 5 yards a carry, and he didn't have anything longer than 15 yards. So it wasn't like that was one big chunk.
Yeah.
Keep feeding him. Give him the ball. And if you bring in, you've got 2, second string tackles when Abe Lucas and Charles Cross went out with injuries. What do tackles typically, or what do offensive linemen typically do better in the beginning of their careers? It's run block, right? Typically, run blocking is an easier thing for them to do coming out or earlier in their career than pass block. And I don't know Stone Forsythe or Jake Curran well enough to know what it is that they do better. But I would come out and just say, we're just going to run the ball. This defensive line outside of Aaron Donald is trash. These linebackers outside of Ernest Jones are trash, right? Let's go run the ball. Let's take a hold of this game. Let's take the game by a throat, and we'll pass when we have to. That's my philosophy. That's what I think the Seahawks have done, maybe not last year, but before that. I know not a lot of people agree with that. We want to see the explosive offense and we see all the weapons, but I think that would have been a recipe to win the game, because you keep the Rams off the field, you churn out first downs, you keep giving the ball to Walker, you utilize Charbonnet, and you move on.
I understand some of your points, and I do agree with some of your points. There's a little nuance in there. I don't strongly disagree with you given the game plan. I just think it's important to keep in mind your personnel. Just like we were talking about defense, You are wrong about the offensive linemen being able to come in and run block easier. That's not the case, because college is so air raid that most of these linemen are much better at the pass and they struggle with the run. And so that's important to consider. I just think the personnel has changed. I think that used to be the case. I just think that with the changes of college offense, I mean, that's the problem with Cross and Lucas, right? Is that they are great in pass protection, but when it comes to run blocking, they're just not that great there. So same thing with your interior linebacker. Well, for whatever reason, I think Phil Haynes actually did pretty good with the run this past week, but now Jake Curhan is great at the run. Now if you're going to run behind somebody, you run behind that dude. He's really good at that. He's very poor at pass protection. He's kind of the opposite. Stone Forsythe falls more into the better at pass protection, awful at run blocking. So most of your offensive linemen are built to protect. Because of that, I'm not sure that the best way is to just run the ball down their throat. You're right in terms of time of possession. It will help. You're also right in the sense of, I don't get why they went away from K9. I don't understand why he was such an explosive part of what you had going right for you. And then it just seemed like he didn't see the ball anymore. Now, they did do some running, to your point. In fact, they ran to the point where I think it upset me a little, but what they did was they ran with DJ Dallas.
Yeah.
And that made me mad. All right. So they actually did a little bit of what you wanted in the second half, right? They run, pass. That's pretty much what it was. It was run, pass. But that didn't get them far. So I think they actually did a little bit of what you wanted. They didn't do what you wanted in the sense of personnel. I think K9 was the best person to have out there. And I can't for the life of me understand why you had one thing going right for you and decided we don't need it anymore. Okay. Right. I don't think DJ Dallas, I didn't need to see him as much as we did. I'll be honest. I didn't need to see him.
Do you know why we saw him more than Charbonnet in this game? Do you think they don't think Charbonnet's ready quite yet?
So Charbonnet actually got technically more snaps.
He got more snaps, but
he got one more carry.
I would have expected, if you're going to invest a second round pick in him and you're going to talk about him in the way that you do, DJ Dallas is like break glass in case of emergency.
Yes.
And a special teams player, right?
Yes.
Not a player splitting carries with a more talented player. The only thing I can think of is if they don't feel like Charbonnet can pick up can pass block or pick up the blitz. You know, young running backs don't play. Typically it's because they can't pick up the blitz, right? But for me, as you said, I don't need to see DJ Dallas. I need to see him on special teams and in mop-up time, and that's about it.
I agree. I think it has a lot to do probably with the makeup of the offensive line. I think less of Charbonnet and more of you got to be good at being decisive with an offensive line that's forward run blocking. So maybe they trust K9 with his experience, even though he kind of struggled with that last year. Maybe they trust his extra year of experience will help him with that. And they trust that DJ Dallas knows enough about that to be good. I'm actually not sure it's pass pro because Charbonnet did well in the preseason when it came to pass pro. And DJ Dallas allowed a pressure. So, I mean, I don't know how many snaps he was snap protection.
That's what Dallas's contribution is, that typically he's in the right place at the right time, right? He's not explosive, so you're not getting any big plays from him, but he's in the right place at the right time. He'll get you your 3 yards. You know, if there's a little bit of a hole, he'll get you your 3 yards. He's not going to make the wrong decisions, but he's not dynamic. Yeah. And I think Charbonnet, Charbonnet's a big dude. He's not a small running back. And so he should be able to hold up. I look at this team and, like you said, Lockett was, he had the concussion, obviously, or the potential concussion, obviously. I don't think they said it ended up saying it was, but
I think he cleared it.
He was nowhere to be found. And that could have been protection. That could have been play calling, right? You saw DK undressed that corner on the touchdown. The corner was going one way, DK was going the other. You see that and you think to yourself, how come we can't do that more, right? Where was that at most of the game? But to your point, the pressure on Gino was so much that he couldn't do anything.
No, he couldn't do anything. It was bad.
I'll tell you what, if those tackles are out for any amount of time, and from what I read today, it said Charles Cross, it was a toe, and the x-rays were clean, but he said that, the toe was bothering him. So I would assume he can push through that.
Oh.
But Lucas, it sounds like he might be, it was the knee injury or the knee issue that he had in the preseason where they had to rest him. So if he's out and you're going against Aiden Hutchinson and that Detroit Lions team, that's not good.
Yeah, I'm afraid.
Not good.
And I've felt pretty strongly now for a while that we've got some of the worst offensive line depth in the league. Like most people, there's not as huge of a drop off for most teams as there is for the Seahawks. Because I'm not sure Stone Forsythe is NFL talent, to be honest. I mean, his footwork is so slow that I really don't consider him to be NFL caliber talent.
He's just big.
Yeah. And the other guy, Jake Curhan, the only thing that makes him NFL talent is his elite run blocking ability. He can do that very well. He's just so bad at the other that it's hard to really rely on him for any long period of time. But I want to go back to a point. I actually forgot to make this point earlier about Gino and his running. So this is something that I picked up on. It was near the end of last year, maybe 14, 15. I can't remember the exact game. But Pete Carroll was asked about Gino. I think he made this run play and I think he almost hurt himself or something like that. And Pete mentioned that we got to get him to do that less. We want him to take less of that opportunity. He implied something along the lines of like, we don't want him doing that as much anymore. Like we want to try to coach that out. We want him to really I guess not take those chances. And I wonder, that kind of pulled back up in my mind as I'm watching Gino. not just go for it, right? Because before it felt like early on last year, especially early on, he would just take off, right? With no inhibitions. And it did begin to slow up. Even the second half of last year, we began to see like he doesn't run as much. He runs when you need him to, but he's not running as much. And I wonder, is that something they're trying to talk to him about? Pete's mentioned it was something they wanted to talk to him about. Is that in the back of his mind? Is he not allowed to run anymore? Like, are they just trying to avoid a rust situation?
Well, you got to ask the question. You got to ask the question: how much do they believe in Drew Lock if they're trying to protect Geno Smith from injury? Because I assume the reason they don't want him to run is they want to protect him from injury.
Yeah.
But one of the big, positives about Geno Smith coming out of West Virginia was his improvisational skill and his ability to run and pick up a quick 10 yards, 12 yards, 15 yards. We see that from the successful quarterbacks now, right? There are very few quarterbacks in the league, when you talk about the top quarterbacks, who don't pick up 15 yards a chunk when a team is playing, too deep. Yep. And everyone, and they run go routes or whatever, and you got the quarterback is just taking off, right? You see that over and over again. I would rather see them go for it and let Geno loose and trust him. He should be out there playing the way he's always known how to play, right? I think he is a pocket quarterback in many ways, and I think that is his best skill, is his ability to be accurate and make good decisions. But the reality is he's got better wheels than they're giving him credit for.
Yeah,
to me, that's just
allowing him to do.
Yeah, and I think that's they must not be very confident in Drew Lock if that's the way they're thinking, because you're giving up first downs, not allowing him to run like that. I think it's a great point.
No, they don't trust Drew Lock, and I don't understand why I really don't understand why they brought him back. I have a theory. I think John likes him so much more than Pete. I'll be honest. I think John loves him, and I think Pete he's grown on Pete. But I don't think Pete liked him initially, because he was begging Geno Smith to come sign back after the trade with Russell Wilson, right? He's like, we really hope we can get Geno back, right? And the whole time he just didn't seem to trust Drew Lock. Now I think year 2, he seems to be more complimentary of him. He seems to appreciate his integrating into the system and his attitude and his mindset. But I still don't think that trust is there. So you're probably right. That's probably where some of that comes from in terms of wanting to hold Geno back is I don't think Pete trusts him. And I just would have rather than got a rookie than I wasn't with the Drew Lock signing personally.
Right. Moving forward, what do you think the Seahawks need to do? Big points. What do you think they need to do to be able to go into Detroit and kind of right the ship? And, I think they would surprise a lot of folks. Given Detroit's victory in Kansas City, they'd shock a lot of folks by going into Detroit and winning.
Yes.
What do the Hawks need to do to make that happen based on what you've seen in this first week? Completely
change the defensive game plan. Completely change the defensive game plan. You need to be playing more man principles. You need to be playing more. I think they need to blitz more. I would appreciate it, like you said, if they dropped their actual outside linebackers, the guys who are like meant to drop in coverage, drop those guys in coverage instead of your interior. I do like that they played a lot of nickel. I think you want to continue doing that. You just need a better nickel back. Like you need Devin Witherspoon. You want that guy playing in those reps, especially against Amon-Ra St. Brown. You definitely need somebody who could, because Kobe Bryant would just he's gonna get burnt. Killed. Oh, he would get killed. I'd rather see Julian Love at that spot, to be honest. Anywho, so that's what needs to happen on defense. I think what they did from a schematic perspective, I think even personnel perspective, I think it was fine in terms of the defensive line. I think if you got better coverage, Goff will take some time to think. I mean, if you pressure Goff, that's how you rattle him. Like if there's a time to be aggressive, it's against that guy. If you give him pocket time, he'll just eat you up all day. So I think they need to think that strategy. Offensively, I do think they need to let Geno loose a little bit. I also think they can do a better job of trying to get JSN comfortable, get him some reps in. You might need him sooner than you think if Tyler Lockett's not going to have the year that we're used to Tyler Lockett having. You're going to need some younger infusion of talent to help offset. I think DK is going to continue to benefit from some of the coverage if JSN can get going, but you got to get him going. I want to see a few less screens. Like,
like zero.
Screens are important. We know you like screens. Like, let's just try one or two. Like, let's just try that a game and just see if we can manage that first before we just do anything else. And I want to see less of DJ Dallas. I'm sorry. Run can and if he only got 12 carries last week, cowbell him next week because he's with another thing is because the offensive line isn't good at run blocking. That's their biggest weakness. You need a guy who can improvise in a way to get around that. And K9 does that better than any running back you have on the roster, except for maybe Kenny McIntosh, who is hurt right now. I think you need those kind of guys more than your Charbonnets or your Dallases right now. I don't think the line's good enough for Charbonnet to really shine. So lean on your guy.
You know, offensively, and this doesn't matter a whole lot, but you got Kenneth Walker's going into Detroit, right? Michigan State, went to Michigan State from Michigan. You pump him up. You tell him, look, you average 5.3 yards a carry. We're going to give you the ball 22 times in this game if we can. And I want you to show out in front of friends and family, right? I want you to this is your opportunity to shine. You give that to him. Defensively, you brought up something that made me think, if you know your defense was not great in week one, right? It was poor. Terrible. And you gave up all this stuff when you gave the quarterback time. I'd have half a mind, especially Witherspoon isn't back, to just sell out sometimes, right? We're gonna rush 8 and we're gonna come after you. We're gonna try to create a turnover. You might, in a panic move, throw towards Reek, and Reek might pick it off. Or you might put a ball up, and we all know Quandre Diggs is one of the best coverage, deep safeties in the game, and he has so much range. If there's air underneath the ball, he's getting there.
Yeah.
And the only way you get a quarterback to make a mistake like that is by putting pressure on him. Send 3 of the 4 linebackers, right?
Yep.
Do something like that. Couple Wagner or Brooks with a nickelback next to him in the base defense even. Drop that nickelback into coverage in the middle and let Wagner or Brooks blitz.
Yep.
So take some chances against them. The thing I'm worried about is Lions' offensive line is good. There's a lot of first-round picks on that line. There's a lot of talent on that line.
Yep.
And if they can't hold up against the run, we know that they were great last week. But if it's 2022 Hawks run defense against the Lions will run the ball all day long. You'll see Montgomery get 15 carries. You'll see Gibbs get 15 carries.
I don't think it'll be that bad because I think Bobby's presence does more than what people want to give it credit for. I really do. I think his presence does far greater. I think according to PFF, he had like 9 tackles where he literally stopped a play on sight. Right. The next closest guy was like 4 with Boye Mafe, who we all know is elite at run defense as well. So I think you won't get ran over the same way you did last year. Now it's probably not going to be, 2.9. 2.9 that's not realistic. Now maybe it's closer to 4 yards a carry than what you want, but I think they can get it down enough. But if I'm the Lions and I look at that tape from week 1, we are airing it out. Like I am. St. Brown is going to be all up and down this field. Like that would be my game plan going in. And so I'm hoping. So you have to account for that. And I think just stay with what they did you might have to make some defensive adjustments in terms of the run game. But I think the Lions are happy to let Jared Goff cook, especially if it's going to have time. Like you said, he's got a really good offensive line. And so if you don't apply pressure, and that's what I'm concerned the most about. I'm concerned that the pressure will be the biggest issue next game. We're not doing a preview, but if I had to point to a concern, I think it would be lack of pressure. I think Pete was probably embarrassed by how bad his coverage was. I think he will make some adjustments with that. I really do. I don't know if it'll be good enough to be great, but it will be better. Will he be more aggressive?
You would hope.
He has struggled to.
Bringing it full circle for me, I just want to see an identity. I want to see, even if the Hawks go in there and compete and lose, you don't want them to lose, obviously, but I want to walk out of there and say, okay, they're running the ball. Walker got 20 carries. They hit a couple of passes deep off of play action, right? Like a Lockett post or, a Metcalf go ball, something like that. off of play action. I know this is what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to soften the defense up with the run and run play action and throw the ball deep. And on defense, whatever it might be, we saw them play, blitz a lot more to try to get pressure. I loved it. Or we saw some replacement of some of the middle linebackers with quicker players, knowing that they had a problem dropping in coverage. That's who they're going to be moving forward. I think they need an identity. They need something to hang their hat on. They looked listless in this game. Like there wasn't something they could just go back to and say, this is who we are. We got to get back to this. This is how we win this game. Because if they had it, they could have imposed their will on this Rams team and won.
I think even if they did some things well in week 2, I wouldn't peg that their identity. It's really too early for me with that. Sure. You want to see them have strengths. Sure. You want to see them do something well. I agree with that part. You want to see they did this well or they improved in this area, right? You want to see those things because they cannot have another performance. The only thing they did do well was stop the run. Right. Everything else was abysmal. So right. You want to see more things that they do well. Mm-hmm. But I still think because especially how much of an anomaly that week 1 is, I still think that's going to be too early to call an identity. Let's say they do all the things that you said, and then the next week they do more intermediate game. They do, you know what I mean? Like I think you can add too soon, especially when they're one game.
I think you can add to what it is that you do well, but go out there and do something well and do it well after you said this is what you're going to do, right? If you say we're going to do this to the team internally and you go out and do it, now you've got confidence.
Right.
Got something to hang your hat on. It doesn't mean you can't add to it, right? It doesn't mean, okay, we ran a bunch of go balls on play action last week. This week we're going to do that, but it's going to be some deep ends instead, right? It's going to be a 18-yard in route, and we're going to do some different stuff, sure, right? Run a little different part of the route tree. But like I said, any successful business, any successful team, you know what they're good at. You look at them and you say, what is, I know the Chiefs lost, but who are the Chiefs? The Chiefs are Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and getting no-name running backs the ball out of the backfield. And we're gonna get a lead, and then we're gonna unleash a pass rush. Defense isn't great on Kansas City, but they know with the lead, the other team has to pass and has to compete with Mahomes. You know who they are, right? That's what I want to see. That's what I think the team is lacking. I want to see them do some things well, but Detroit isn't necessarily the team to do it against. So, like you said, I know this isn't a preview. I am already nervous for that game after this performance. Definitely,
I'm nervous for the season after that game. That's a game that makes you legitimately, and not even in an overreacting way, question the whole season. But I do think this. I think if they play a little bit more to I want to try to end things as we wrap up here on a somewhat positive note. I think things that you can positively take away is that Kenneth Walker is who you thought he was. I think you need to use that. Sorry, the other running backs are fine, but like, I don't want Kenneth Walker to get injured, but I just think you need some explosiveness somewhere. And until you can figure out how to get it from your wide receivers, though I think that should be a little bit more natural than what it was. I think you've got to play on that to some extent. I also want to see some variety in the types of throws that they're doing. That way they don't get predictable. I want to see variety in the types of throws that they're doing. I want to see DK running some curl. I mean, because he can run anything. Especially his route running looks a little bit improved. We'll see. But the route running on that touchdown was, like you said. So I kind of want to see him do some underneath stuff and I think they work the tight ends pretty well. You would like to see Noah Fant step up just a little bit more offensively. On defense, play to your players' strengths. Seriously, like use the talent that you have and build around that. Understand, show me as a coach, your personnel. Put the linebackers in the position that they should be in. Put your corners in the position that they should be in. And if they just did that, that looks like a completely different team. Honestly, if they did those things alone, if they just played to their personnel, then I think the Seahawks have a chance. Now, as bad as they look, I can't say with confidence I think they'll win, but I think it would be competitive. And at this point, from where they started, I think that's all you can ask for.
I have the same thing in terms of positives moving forward in my notes. I have the same thing. First thing offensively is Kenneth Walker's production, right? It's clear he can produce. We know that from last year. Give him the ball. And And then, as you said, I didn't see the PFF numbers, but the pass rush was a lot better individually.
Yep.
So the talent is there. Physically, you have the players. Cut them loose. Let them rush the passer, right? Let them do what they do best. And then I also have that Rick Woolen is real, right? Because he had that year last year. We know he was great. You always wonder, okay, next year, what's going to happen, right? And I think from this game, yes, he gave up the bigger chunk play at the end of the game. And his numbers weren't perfect, but the reality is the Rams stayed away from him. And so you have a top cover corner, at least at one of the positions. So if you've got a great corner and you've got a pass rush that has a lot of potential, use it. Blitz. Put your corners out there on an island, right? Get some pressure, create some turnovers, create some havoc, because sitting in this cover 2 shell and doing all this deep safety stuff, not going to cut it. Yeah. We saw that in week 1, not going to cut it. So there are things to build on. And I think you made the best point of the entire day in saying that if you just put the defensive players in position to succeed, the talent is there to win the game.
Yep.
But you have to set them up to succeed, right?
Yep.
I think that's the best point of the entire podcast is that. And they clearly didn't do that in game 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll do a preview for the Lions game, see what we got, to see where we get further along in the week and see where we are with injuries. We'll be paying closely attention to that as we had some key injuries in that last game. But Tino, why don't you tell them what you got going, where they can find you, tell them a little bit about the Mariner stuff, and then I'll wrap us up.
So Mariners cast Monday through Friday. Mariners down in the stretch run, currently in the playoff race. You can find the Mariners cast at Ethos Mariners, ETHOS MARINERS on Twitter. Mariners cast is also available on the SportsEthos website. My Twitter handle is Tino Jr. 20, TINOJR20. I will have podcasts all this week. I hope to come back with Candace later on this week to preview this upcoming Lions game. Having a blast despite the Seahawks 0-1 record. The talent's there, lots to improve upon, but still super excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Tino. We're really excited you're on and going to be joining us regularly. Mm-hmm. Super excited to have you. So make sure you check him out. Also, be sure to check out the Ethos Sports page at Ethos Seahawks. We got a ton of information out there, especially today. I've got PFF grades, updates on rookies. It's a lot of information, guys, you don't want to miss. I'm going to continue to analyze. I go back and watch the film, give some of my takeaways. So make sure that you're following the page. In the meantime, guys, that's all the time we have for today. That's it. I'm out. And as always, go Hawks.